All right, good morning, everybody. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Just want to say good morning and welcome to our panel discussion today on entrepreneurial partnerships between national laboratories and regional institutions of higher education. My name is Michael Nestor. I'm the board director for the Government University Industry Research Roundtable, or GUIRR for short, which we like to say GUIRR a lot. The panel today is a direct result of my fireside chat with all of you last year, if you happen to have been there or remember that. It was in that chat we had a discussion about how we can better work across GUIRR and FDP. For those who don't know, and I'll highlight it in a second, FDP is part of the larger GUIRR umbrella at the National Academies, and we want to continue our long partnership. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But before I make an overall introduction to today's panel, I'd like to say some thank yous. I want to first thank the FDP Executive Director, Maria Kozalka, Senior Program Assistant, Sarah Petrusek, and our Academy's FDP lead, Tom Arison, for supporting this panel today. I'd also like to thank Alexandra Albanak and Michelle Masucci, who are your GUIRR Council ex officio members for FDP, and they help facilitate between both of our organizations. I'd also like to have a special thank you to the FDP Contract Subcommittee, Katie Cook, Jeanette Hannum-Hayes, and Missy Peloso, because a couple weeks ago we engaged with them in a really great conversation, and they put together a few of the questions that are going to be asked today. So really appreciate that feedback as well. Sorry, 1 second here. Sorry, my slide just unslid. A big thank you also to Megan Clifford. She's the Associate Laboratory Director for Science and Technology Partnerships and Outreach at Argonne National Laboratory. All of this got started because she gave a panel presentation at the GUIRR meeting, which was literally a month after our fireside chat here last year. So I was able to talk with her and synthesize all of this together. And it's really the genesis for our conversation today. And also thank you to all of our panelists for being here. It's really great to meet all of you. And our moderator, Demetria Gallagher, who I'll introduce in a minute. Last thank you goes to the team at GUIRR and our PGA colleagues, including Program Officer Alex Temple, who I think many of you have met. He did the heavy lifting on putting all of this together. Delaney Bond, our Senior Program Assistant, Senior Program Officer Andre Porter, who leads the roundtable on Black men and Black women in science, engineering, and medicine at the academies, and was really instrumental in us thinking about this holistically in terms of how we wanted to approach this conversation today. And then Jen Griffiths, who are Senior Program Officer at GUIRR, who helped to make sure that we were staying aligned between FDP and GUIRR as well. They're really an amazing team to work with. So let me say a few words about GUIRR and FDP before we get into the discussion and I make my introduction. So as I said, GUIRR is a part of the National Academies. FDP is part of that umbrella. We're really a convening platform for honest and open conversation about national leaders across the entire U.S. research ecosystem. So we think a lot about innovation and competitiveness. We drive networking and discussion. We think about critical issues, and we tackle cutting-edge research and development. I do not have a slide clicker, so maybe, is that it right there? Thank you. And then I guess I just hit that. Great. So we really focus on new and emerging technologies, science and society, and competitiveness and innovation. And I don't think I need to mention to any of you here in this room that increasingly we need these partnerships between government, university, and industry. Oftentimes the pipelines are there, but the cultures are very disconnected. So a lot of what GUIRR does is to really work on those two things, pipeline and culture, with a lot of focus on the culture, trying to get these institutions to understand each other so that we can benefit national scientific productivity and competitiveness. So I'd just be remiss if I didn't mention that we were started in 1984, but really the genesis of this is the National Research Commission in 1979. Officially started in 1984 for GUIRR, and so it's our 40th anniversary. We've got a meeting, just to give you a sense of what we tackle and how we think, we've got a meeting coming up in June, the title of which is Reimagining the Triple Helix of Innovation, Investments, and Partnerships. So we are an organization that's been around for quite a while, but we're sort of reimagining how we're thinking about these problems in the 21st century. But GUIRR and FDP, as I mentioned before, have a really special relationship. Within a year of forming GUIRR, the National Academies held a meeting, and they produced a report called Reducing Bureaucratic Accretion in Government and University Procedures for Responsible Research. That's very Academies. And they have a subtitle, and I'm not going to read it because that's also very Academies. But anyway, luckily we've shortened these titles of these reports in the modern era. That said, this document here, which was published in June of 1985, so barely a year after GUIRR was started, this is the genesis for FDP, for this organization. So that shows you how important that relationship is. It was one of the first things that they thought about. And so today in this panel, it's really a representation of actually what was started in 1985. Excuse me. And what we'd like to do is really inspire a dialogue between FDP and GUIRR, and really think about the resources available to them in the national laboratories. We want to develop new opportunities for engagement with the national laboratories and their R&D innovation ecosystem. We want to create ideas and action and catalyze those ideas for your interaction with the national labs. And most importantly, I think we want to clarify the needs of both national labs and regional universities. And I highlighted this to facilitate partnerships to support and drive innovation more efficiently. That comes right back to that original document. You all think about administrative burden. Let's think about administrative burden in the context of thinking about our innovation ecosystem and what burden not having efficient transfer between these institutions puts on our innovation ecosystem as we think to the future. So with that, I'm going to make my introduction now to our moderator, Demetria Gallagher. So Demetria is an executive vice president at Venturewell, and she leads the higher education and innovation ecosystem there. She oversees key organizational initiatives, including a $2.4 million faculty grant program. She also leads federal efforts such as ICOR and IUCRC. Both of these initiatives position institutions as catalysts for regional ecosystem building, so I think that's going to be really important today. She's recognized as a national expert for inclusive innovation. Demetria specializes in engaging HBCUs, tribal colleges, and MSIs to enhance their tech transfer and commercialization efforts. She's also demonstrated leadership across sectors, including government, STEM, entrepreneurship, and innovation. She served as a policy analyst at the White House and White House political appointee during the Obama administration, where she spun up national programs for minority-owned businesses and MSIs to become engaged in America's top emerging industries. She holds a bachelor's in sociology from University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, and she also holds a master's in sustainable urban planning from George Washington University. So with that, I introduce Demetria, and thank you to our panel.
Good morning and happy Friday, everyone. Wow, until somebody reads your bio, it's like, wow, I kind of accomplished some great things, right? So I hope that we feel the same way when I read the bios for the panelists. First, I would like to extend my thanks to Michael Nestor and the National Academy of Science team for hosting an outstanding conference this week. You know, we explored several important topics to support federal engagement in the research space, which brings us to the mission of today's panel: how to build bridges between our national laboratories and the entrepreneurship spirit thriving within America's network of higher education institutions. Now, as we are examining partnership development within these two audiences, we will also share insights on building inclusive pathways for underrepresented innovators. Our focus will be on how these collaborations can provide critical support for entrepreneurs and innovators from diverse backgrounds. Our great panel of experts are in the fields of innovation and entrepreneurship, with direct experience engaging with national laboratories and higher education institutions, particularly HBCUs and MSIs. We will share their unique perspective and experiences, shedding light on the resources and support systems available for emerging innovators. Our goal is to really inspire a dialogue with this diverse audience about the vast resources available within the national laboratories and to uncover new opportunities for engagement within this rich R&D innovation ecosystem. By the end of our discussion, we really hope that we equip you with actionable ideas for building active pathways between emerging research institutions and the national laboratories. And then lastly, we aim to clarify the needs of both the national labs and regional universities to really facilitate impactful partnerships that support and drive innovation. So really, let's use this opportunity to catalyze action and build stronger, inclusive innovation networks. So with that being said, now I'm really ready to introduce our starting lineup. As you can see, we have a great group of panelists in front of me, all which are national experts that will help to contribute to today's conversation. So first, here to my left, we have Dr. Deco, who is the Director of Chain Reaction Innovations at Argonne National Lab, which is in Chicago, both of our hometowns. He is the Executive Scholar also at Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management with a PhD in Chemical Physics from Harvard University and a BS in Chemistry from UC Berkeley. And then next we have Dr. Teresa Merriweather Orok. She's the Director of the Center for Entrepreneurship, Innovation, and Economic Development at Alabama A&M University. She has assisted over 200 businesses, including more than 75 in Alabama during COVID. And then next we have Gail Bassette. She is the Director of Economic Development and Strategic Engagement at Bowie, where she fosters partnerships within government, industry, businesses, and academia to support the university's academic development and strategic goals. And within 20 years of engagement and research with HBCUs and MSI, she has secured multi-million-dollar funding to advance these collaborations. Then next, we have Desmond Stubbs, which is a recognized STEM diversity advocate with over 15 years of experience in driving STEM workforce innovation that promotes inclusiveness within the federal scientific community. In his current role as a director of STEM initiatives, he supports strategic guidance at the Oak Ridge Associated University's engagement with federal government clients, the MSI and HBCU community, national labs, and a host of other partners. And then last but not least, we have Laura Stoy, she is an experienced entrepreneur, inventor, and scientist that's passionate about critical mineral supply chains, which definitely sounds very smart and ambitious. We're excited for that. She earned a PhD in environmental engineering from Georgia Institute of Technology, where she developed a patent-pending technology harvesting valuable minerals from waste materials. So now I'm going to turn it over to our panelists, where they would just provide a more of a detailed introductions about their work so we can learn more about their experience. Want to go first?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Demetria, and thank you, Michael, and the FDP and GUIRR team for inviting us at Argonne to join you. So I'm the Director of Chain Reaction Innovations. We are the lab-embedded entrepreneurship program at the U.S. Department of Energy. We're the node at Argonne National Lab. Argonne is the first national lab in the U.S., and what we do at CRI, Chain Reaction Innovations, is we bring in innovators like Laura to embed at the national lab for 2 years. With a 2-year fellowship, they get to de-risk their technologies that oftentimes are born out of a university setting from a federal grant, and then they come to Argonne to really use our facilities, capabilities, and of course our expertise, right? The people that can help these innovators succeed. And so it's really a joy to be part of this ecosystem and to see, as Michael mentioned, when this collaborative space between government, university, and industry come together. And Laura's in industry as a startup, but I think that's the part that's really cool, and that's why I think this conversation is just so exciting. So thank you.
Yes, of course.
Yes, hi. So I'm Teresa Merriweather Orok. I hail from Alabama A&M University. We are one of your 19H land grant, 1890 land grant HBCUs. I serve as the executive director, the inaugural executive director for the Center for Entrepreneurship, Innovation, and Economic Development there in Huntsville. I have about a 15-year background in sponsored research, which includes both grants and government contracts, both within the state of Georgia, with the University System of Georgia, and have been in Huntsville for about 17 years. So my work brings me here today to engage with these very astute individuals to talk about something that is very near and dear to my heart. And that is about relationships and engagement and sustainable engagement with our national partnerships. I came into Alabama A&M about in '06 as vice president for sponsored research. And a few years later, I stepped over to stand up a center that is very active within the community, within the region, and actually across the nation. And my work dovetails on the robust economic development that exists within the Huntsville, Alabama area. The national laboratories, we have a few there in the Huntsville area, and with us being the 1890 land grant institution. But one other thing that we have at Alabama A&M, and it has been around for a very long time, even before I came, it has transitioned into another organization, but we have a government contracting, a separate government contracting entity on the campus of Alabama A&M. And what that means is that it is, we have the GSA schedule, and so we're able to facilitate and execute government contracting. We are one of the few HBCUs across the country to have this kind of outfit that can engage the federal government, that can engage corporations, industries, or what have you, and not only the execution of grants, but also the execution of government contracting. Over the years, we have certainly enjoyed a relationship with many of our national laboratories, but certainly we are not where we need to be and not where we will be. And this is a vehicle to really explore and to take a deeper dive into what our HBCUs have to offer. So just excited to be here. I work with a number of HBCUs, a number of other institutions. I also serve as president-elect for the University Economic Development Association, which is a 1,100-member organization. Our focus around that organization is economic development. We also engage many of our partners who are with the research environments across the nation. So just really, really excited to be here to talk about what I believe and what I know will work for our HBCUs and MSIs.
Can you just give the mic? Okay, go ahead. Good morning, everyone. I'm Gail Bassette, and I am the Director of Economic Development and Strategic Engagement at Bowie State University, which is the oldest HBCU in the state of Maryland. I am so happy to be here, and I give all of my thanks to my president, President Amita Bro, and actually to Michelle also for talking to my president, and my president recommended that I be here today. Quite frankly, I had never heard about the Federal Demonstration Partnership, so I am delighted to be here. Just a little bit about me. About 2.5 years ago, President Bro and I had a conversation because she, at that time, she served at the White House Initiative on HBCU's advisory board, and she saw all these federal government opportunities come across the desk. And Bowie State had not ever had a federal government focus or vertical. And I have over 20 years of federal government contracting experience as a federal government contractor. I'm a former 8A contractor. And I also served as the cabinet secretary of the state of Maryland for the Department of General Services. And so I understand the procurement background. And I also am a strong advocate for the inclusion and participation of minorities in the procurement activities in the federal government and state government. So it was a great opportunity for me to come to my alma mater, which is Bowie State University. So, it being here is really a special, has a special meaning for me. But anyway, my job is really the federal government focus. And I've been in Bowie for 2.5 years, and we have been able to acquire probably up to $15 million now in federal government contracts and cooperative grants, which Bowie has never done before. And so, yeah, I attribute it to my background as an 8A firm because it's all about partnerships. We can't do anything without partnerships. As you all know, and you may not know, HBCUs has been around for a while. Bowie, I think we were celebrating 160 years. But we still have very limited resources, and we consider it underrepresented, and we should not be. But we depend on partnerships, so I'm very astute on how that works, and that's how we are able to get where we are now. And I just am so grateful to our president for that. But I need to say, I am not the technology transfer guru at Bowie. Bowie's been trying to do this for, I believe, since 2020. Trying to establish a tech transfer office. Back in December, we hired a very capable and knowledgeable tech transfer officer who he's here today, Dr. Jai J. Dr. Jai, would you please stand up? He has over 20 years of translational research experience, and not only does he bring that experience, he brings his partners and resources to Bowie. So we are in the assessment stage, if you will. We are in the discovery stage, but we are very confident that we're going to get there. And one last thing, I also am leading a grant where we're bringing on a consortium of 15 HBCUs to teach them how to do work with the federal government. I'm very familiar with the federal labs because I also work with the Minority Business Development Agency, where I help. I was the executive director of the Federal Procurement Center, helping business across the country gain better access to federal government contracts, and that's why I learned about it. So anyway, I'm excited to be here, as you can see, to learn, to partner with you, and just grateful for the engagement here. Thank you.
Thank you. It's hard to follow these people. You guys are impressive. So I'm Desmond Stubbs. I'm the director of STEM Diversity Initiatives at Oak Ridge Associate University. Many of you probably are familiar. Many of you are members. If you don't know, now you know. So we are a consortium. We're a nonprofit. We're a consortium of 155 universities. We were not mentioned in the Oppenheimer movie, but our genesis stems from the Manhattan Project, where we were founded by laboratory scientists at Oak Ridge National Lab to create a vehicle to bring scientists from universities into the lab. Imagine that, right? We just had that conversation in the previous panel. And creating these mechanisms is what I work on, and with a diversity lens. So there's a theme here, working with HBCUs. I also work with Hispanic serving institutions, and we have Navajo Tech as part of our membership. So looking at ways based on the capabilities, the competencies at universities, and their mission, right? We're not just going to hop on opportunities because there are dollar signs attached to it, but it has to be in sync and phase with the mission of the university. I always like to keep that thing conserved because I think that's the longevity of these relationships and partnerships. People may change, but the mission of the school never changes. These schools are over 200 years old. So that's the lens I use when I come to the table and I talk partnerships. Entrepreneurship is big in my world because a lot of our kids want to be entrepreneurs. They're natural entrepreneurs. They look inside their communities. HBCUs are community-based schools. I say that all the time. They look at their communities and they have a thought of, how do I improve the community around me? How to improve the lives of the folks in our community using an economic lens, right? And the federal government is interested in more people paying taxes. So we both have a mutual interest there. So I work in particular with one program called the DOE Mentor Protege Program. So this is an opportunity for prime contractors like OREU and the contracting world that manages the national labs to work with small businesses. But under 8A exemption, HBCUs actually qualify as a small business. So in the past 10 years, we had Morehouse College, Fayetteville State University, now UNC Fayetteville State, like that, and Southern University all participated in the Mentor Protege program. Again, focused on acquisition, focused on contracts, right? It's a different lens, it's a different revenue stream. There are, The requirements are, we just had this conversation, the requirements are different. There's a lot of nuance, and the infrastructure at most of our universities, except for probably Alabama A&M and you, because you're here, it's just not there. There's not the equivalent contracting officer at the university. These people are expensive, let's just be honest. And to get those qualifications, you know, it's hard to recruit that level of talent to build up a contracting shop. So that's the beauty of the mentored protege. So the schools can use us, our contracting capabilities, and we can target opportunities together where they can be the prime or we can be the prime. We just negotiate that. But the negotiation happens actually with the mentor protege contract alone. It's actually a contract between the Department of Energy and the institution where labor categories are already set. Like all of the indirect rates are already set. So all of those pieces, the hard pieces, how do you price a 5-year professor in chemistry as a research scientist for a contract opportunity, right? That's the hard part. What do the rates look like? What is the benefit? What's the fringe? All those things that we don't like to talk about. But that's where we need to be, right? If you want to do competitive, if you want to be competitive in the contracting world, you have to talk about pricing competition, right? And also, you know, what are your win themes? What are the things that are connected to the things that you want, where you want to be, where you are now? And it has to be real, right? And so that's what I work on. It's helping the schools shape, you know, their win themes because they're competing among themselves and they're competing with all of you guys. And so I sort of serve as the liaison because I know where the national research priorities go, and some of them change a little bit each year. And just communicating back to the schools, talking with VPs for sponsored research about what are the upcoming communities. Can we put teams together? You know, can we put collaborations together and start those early conversations with no dollars on the table and then build partnerships from there. And then find these mechanisms, you know, whether it's in the commercialization shops, and the labs are huge cities. Like, the folks don't know what's going on across the lab. So you have to sort of go around knocking on doors and find out, like, what are you actually doing here? I mean, I tell people all the time, it's not that straightforward. I know you guys are looking to streamline things, but you have to, even within, it's just like the university, you guys know that, even within the university, people are doing things that you're connected to, but you don't really know you are. You know, I heard somebody said that they worked at Georgia Tech, and they don't know if Georgia Tech was connected with National Lab. Well, Georgia Tech is one of the founders of Oak Ridge National Lab. It's like the founding university, right? So I don't, but I know why. I know why there's a disconnect, right? Because, you know, this world doesn't do a whole lot of outside communication. There's a lot of inward communication, and so these things happen. But that's my role, and I'm happy to be here. I'll shut up.
Hi, everybody. My name is Laura Stoy. I'm really grateful to be here, kind of, I guess, representing the startup side of this. But I'm the CEO and founder of Rivalia Chemical Co. This is a university spin-out from my PhD work at Georgia Tech, where I earned my PhD in environmental engineering, you know, pulling valuable metals out of waste. It turns out we have tons of waste materials across the United States. We can mine valuable metals from those without opening a new mine. It also turns out it takes 18 years to open a new mine in the United States on average, and we need these metals for electric vehicles and wind turbines and fighter jets and just about anything you can think of. So Rivalia is early in its journey, but I'm currently a Chain Reactions Fellow at Argonne National Lab in the program that Dick co-runs. It is a tremendous program. I'm very excited to have been accepted into it. You know, startups to be successful need resources. And, you know, when I was first raising money for Rivalia, you know, I had people ask me like, oh, can you just buy this piece of scientific equipment? It's like, well, that piece of equipment is, you know, $700,000, and I don't have $700,000 right now. And I still don't. But being embedded in a lab like Argonne means I get to use all of their equipment, I get to use their facilities, and more importantly, I get to work with their scientists and engineers, people who are, you know, the top in their field, just the most incredible and generous people, because it still has that kind of collaborative attitude that you see at universities, but, you know, bigger population, I think. what else? I have also worked at the EPA and with the Federation of American Scientists, so I have had my hands in science and technology and a little bit in policy and entrepreneurship. So I'm really excited to be here, and I'm excited for this panel to get started. So I will cede.
Great, so now we're going to turn it over and transition to some great questions for the panelists. So the first question is, and I will definitely have you answer it, Dr. Coe, is from your experience with different programs, what is the most important factors that result in successful collaborations between universities and national labs? And there's also just a quick second part. And what do national labs need more from universities in this space, and what do they need less of? Because often we talk about the importance of the successful partnership, but then sometimes we have to address like what also is something that we could make sure that's formulated in the partnership.
Great. Thank you, Demetria. That's a great question, and certainly, with the title of this panel on entrepreneurial partnerships, maybe we'll focus there. I think your question was, what are the most important factors that lead to success? And the lens I look through is through, again, startups and innovators like Laura. There are many, many dozens of hundreds of stories like that where an idea was born at the university and then they go out into the world and it gets de-risked and it grows. And one thing we've seen in the last 10 years since the Lab Embedded Entrepreneurship program has been stood up and is really that entrepreneurship is really one successful element that keeps coming back, right? We're able to work with universities beyond research. I think research is the foundation for universities, for national labs, but as we build on top of that, I think entrepreneurship is one of the most important factors, especially as we look about impact and experiential learning for the university's students, grad students, undergrads, and postdocs. And so I think that's where I get really excited about. And coming back to that collaborative space, right? When we think of this river of innovation, I think of three tributaries. Right? There's universities, government, and also industry. And when these tributaries come together, it's messy, right? But like actual confluences, this is where life thrives, right? And I think that place where it's murky, it's not clear, and I think that's really where opportunity arises. And I think entrepreneurship hits right there in that space. And yes, what do we need more of? And I think it's really sharing this opportunity with your colleagues and your students, right? As university-born IP and graduates come out, take a look at our program, the Lab Embedded Entrepreneurship Program. We're in 4 national labs across all 4 time zones in the continental United States. And so just look us up, and I think that awareness would be really helpful.
Any additional feedback from the panel around what the national labs need more from universities? Anyone else want to chime in?
Yes, I will, thank you.
Yeah.
So I think that one of the key issues here has to do with awareness. Awareness in particular amongst our HBCUs. The awareness of what the national laboratories are, what the missions are, and how these institutions might be able to play into this space. So I think that there has to be, or that there should be, a very keen introduction, a very focused introduction of what the national laboratories do and who may become engaged within these national laboratories. I can tell you that having worked with most of our institutions from across the country, both PWIs and HBCUs, MSIs, it is really about awareness. Our HBCUs, those 104 HBCUs across these many states, have the intellect to do the work. But there is the lack of knowledge and the lack of knowing how to connect, how to forge these partnerships. You have to understand that from an HBCU perspective, that it is really resource driven. Many of our institutions are small institutions. We are dealing primarily with first generational students, so we really have to hit the ground running in so many ways here. And so when you begin to layer this research, this whole notion of going out and working with the National Laboratory, it just really becomes inconceivable for so many of our institutions. But what I believe would work, not what I believe, what I know would work, having been in this space for a long time, is that this has to be taken or executed in phases. Look at your institutions that are better poised to do the work with national laboratories. And even some of those institutions that are better poised and better positioned to do the work don't know that they're better poised and better positioned to do the work with national laboratories. And so they have to be convinced that you're there, that the work that you're doing is very valuable, and we need you to join us in this space. So how do you do that? You do that. I know that many of our efforts come down through the president and come down through the provost's office and the other academic leadership offices. But in some way, as you begin to engage our institutions, it's okay to ask the president and to ask the provost to bring your top faculty and experts to the table to address some of these issues. Because in that translation between the president, between the provost, if he or she is not knowledgeable about the national laboratories and the opportunities available, then that translation is often lost. So let's start here. First of all, selecting those institutions that are better poised to work, to do the work, to form those strong national collaborations, and then address their leadership, certainly, protocol issues, but also dig down and to see who it is on that campus who has the tech transfer knowledge. We have several professors on our campus now who have patents. Some of our students have patents. But we have to really get down to understand who these people are and what their competencies are. So I think that just this whole knowledge base, and I think that it is possible to tease out this information. I'm old school, so to tease out this information maybe through focus groups or just having a person like me to come to your lab and I can help you tease out this information with our HBCUs to really understand what their capabilities are, and to not only just understand what their capabilities are, but what their laboratories look like. We've been very blessed at Alabama A&M to have really great equipment. We have wind tunnels and all of these other kinds of things, but you understand that we're in Huntsville, so in order for us to be competitive with that ecosystem that we have had to develop and to stretch in order to stay competitive. So that's my little take. That's my beginning.
No,
take.
thank you so much. Laura, I think you also wanted to provide some insight, right?
Yes, please. This is one of the questions I feel maybe most equipped to answer.
Yes, please.
So when we think about who at your universities, so there's a great wealth of amazing ideas at your universities, and the step towards commercialization, that path is not easy or trivial. And if we think about who is actually doing that work, who's developing the technology, in my mind, that has historically been the graduate students, and to some extent faculty as well, right? The faculty normally don't leave the universities to start these companies, so really it's about getting that attitude in their labs of entrepreneurship and innovation. Everybody's doing innovative research, right? That's part of what makes universities so magical and foundational. But bringing that technology out into the world requires getting those graduate students to think, I can be an entrepreneur and I can, take this step, and having their professor be supportive of that. At Georgia Tech, my alma mater, and yours, there have been a wealth of resources put towards this. There's a ton of new programs, a whole office dedicated to venture programming, a really cool competition called CreateX that has hundreds of students create teams to build apps and devices. And, having that mindset is, I think, huge. And I engaged with a lot of those programs while I was at Georgia Tech, but I still hadn't heard of the Chain Reactions program. It hadn't occurred to me that the National Lab would be a good home for the tech that I was building. And I think part of that is, I think a lot of startups that are in software, and software has a very different set of challenges than hard tech. And the national labs, I think, really excel in providing space for hard tech startups to grow. So really, startups need resources. I think kind of what I've gotten from this panel is that, so startups, are usually small, scrappy teams, right? And maybe some of these programs at the schools are also small, scrappy teams. What the conversation we're having is how do we get resources, right, to fund these programs, and really kind of setting up a roadmap for the graduate students to say, okay, here's where you are now. Here's where, here are the steps to, here's how you raise $1 million. Here's how you, get in with the national labs. Having that kind of chain of education, it's not easy and it's not automatic. That has to be intentional. So even if it's as simple, as a starting point as a flyer from the Chain Reactions program that goes in the tech transfer office or in the, graduate student office, I think that is pretty standard, right? Something in there is, I think, a great way to at least start getting that awareness built.
Great, so now we're going to transition to talking a little bit more about the partnership development with national labs. So we know that many national labs have taken the approach to contracting with universities, where engagement with sponsored program offices is an afterthought. This approach can be problematic for universities for many reasons, because of the expectations of rapid turnaround times and contract clauses that conflict with academic policy. So, Desmond, I think I really want to start with you on thinking, what would your recommendations be to begin the conversation about changing this approach?
I don't know if I can answer that question. I'll answer it this way. So I was just on the other panel, and there's a very similar conversation happening there. So I know the topic says national labs, but because I've started my career, day one, my first job was at Oak Ridge National Lab. I don't read national lab. I read managing partner contractor. That's who you're dealing with, right? There's no such thing as national lab. That's a DOE thing. That's their buildings, that's their facilities, all taxpayer funded, that's the user facility. But the managing and operation, the people who are responsible for commercialization, is contracting side, right? Not necessarily DOE. DOE supports it, but the contractor. So if you look at that managing LLC partnership and you look within who's partnered on that board, and you see, well, who's interested in commercialization? Who's interested in this part of the research? Where is that research within the LLC? Then you're starting to get to that metadata, right? That who do I need to talk to for, building these partnerships, right? If you use that lens rather than this broad national lab lens, you'll get closer to, where the interests lie, who can keep the paperwork moving, right? And keep the process, who can streamline the process because you have that high-level agreement, who they can work it out with their local site office about what that should look like and does it fit within the FAR, does it fit within compliance with the M&O agreement, right? So that's some of the complexities there, but if I can leave with a message for this group, as you start thinking about national lab, think more about the contractors, right? Because I am a prime contractor, right? So eventually it's the decision made by the prime contract using that lens of what our contract with DOE looks like. We're all of the labs, part of the mission is to do outreach to universities. That's written in there, right? Particularly the regional universities. There's a special role there, right? That's purposefully written into these agreements. And so there's always, if you notice, if you ever knock on the door of a national lab, there's always an open door. People are welcoming that conversation, right? That's important. It's actually a metric used for performance evaluation for many of the lab scientists. You know, how many universities are there engaging in collaboration? Are you bringing in students? These are the real questions that are happening at the lab. At least at Oak Ridge National Lab, I can speak to that. And so that's a foot in the door, but the next levels of conversation is understanding the complexity of the lab, how funding happens for different parts of the research. The research doesn't come from sort of one place. It comes from offices that are related to the research. So the Office of Electricity funds like electricity production, electricity technology, right? And understanding the makeup of the lab, I think everybody kind of knows that you have to understand the entity you're dealing with, the federal government. These agencies are so huge and complex and tremendous, but having just taken the elephant in little pieces and understanding, like, I want to do climate research. Who funds, first of all, where does it live at the lab? And it probably lives in different divisions, little pieces of it, right? And who funds it? Which office within the Office of Science is funding that particular research? And you start to get closer to who you're negotiating with, who you're talking to, right? Who's the partnership really going to be with, right? Rather than sort of this big entity, right? And that's the relationship you'll have with the data calls. That's the relationship you'll have with the negotiation and the things you pass off to the contracting officer. So I say start with that. Start with understanding the lab, the partnership that manages the M&O. What are their constraints to the partnership? What are the things that were done in the past? Who currently have relationships? Not necessarily like University of Tennessee and Battelle have a partnership that manages the lab. That's unique, right? You're not going to be University of Tennessee, right? But you could be a Georgia Tech that's affiliated with the lab through various projects that you're trying to grow, where the lab has a need for capacity issues, right? Even a national lab has capacity issues, and they like to farm out projects to universities, right? That's a good thing, and it really looks good in reporting back to DOE. So I'll stop there.
Dick, do you have any additional insight?
Well, I think, wow, Desmond, he speaks the truth, and I think one thing I want to sort of also tie in, Teresa, what you said earlier, and Desmond earlier, you said, let's have early conversations, right? And I think that understanding of how a DOE National Lab is structured, how it works, and Teresa, you mentioned, bring your faculty to those meetings, just like what Desmond is saying. I would say oftentimes these researcher to researcher conversations, like these really cool ideas, and then your question is like, well, it gets frustrating at the end. We're doing the contracting now. Why can't we see the dream, but how do we get there? And I think it's bringing in, you're saying bringing in the faculty. I think we're saying bring in the contractors, like the people along the way to early on, so that we know that we see a path to joint funding, right? Just like many of your PIs and professors, the national labs are also performers on these awards. Right? Our approach is very similar to look at, how do we get and respond to an open, funding opportunity call or a lab call, and bringing in the researchers, bringing in the contracting officers on both sides could, I think, reduce some of these friction.
Gail, I'm going to have the next question for you. The National Labs has a vast array of resources and staff to accelerate discoveries from the bench to the market, but often these resources are not well known to university tech transfer offices and entrepreneurship programs. What needs to be done to better, from the National Labs, to communicate and connect those resources with universities, especially those in the MSI ecosystem?
So I want to piggyback on everyone here, Teresa especially. I want to kind of bring this, kind of level set this. And I want to level set this, and I'm going to circle back to answering the question. But I really want to level set this as far as entrepreneurship partnership, and I want to put the word diversity in here, because we hadn't talked about that. And when I was reading the summary of this session here, and I will quote it here, it says, private funding entrepreneurship has taken on an increasingly important role in diversifying the ways that hard scientific problems are addressed. However, groups traditionally underrepresented in science have not had equal access to the equipment and personnel they need as they develop innovative approaches to future scientific questions. So for me, and as I look at the room, and in my career of advocacy for small and minority or minority participation and diversity, that's the conversation that needs to be had. And so when Teresa was talking about access and awareness, we oftentimes do not. Bowie State has been existing for 160 years. And I was talking to a young lady from the university, I forget the University of California, and they've been in existence for 50 years, and they have a $1.something billion of grants and contracts in their portfolio. We have nowhere near that. So when we talk about entrepreneurship partnerships with the national labs or just in the government as a whole, we have to consider the importance of bringing diversity into this conversation. Because if we don't, then where are we going to end up? So because our diverse perspectives increases everything. Minorities have always been entrepreneurs and innovators. And we've always survived through our innovations. So I think that that is that's the conversation that needs to be had. And I'm going to piggyback on Teresa when she talked about access. I never like to miss an opportunity to pitch an opportunity. Okay? So as we talk about it, and I don't know exactly who's in the room, I would suggest that we do a pilot program to do the assessment.
That's right.
To understand the richness that exists in the HBCUs in the innovation. Because you all probably don't know it, but it's there. We don't have the resources. Bowie started as a teaching college. Most of our professors, they teach and they also PIs and they also managing contracts. It's very difficult. But I would suggest that we can create a white paper. And that white paper can turn into a solicitation. And we can do a pilot program so everyone can understand and see what the HBCUs and MSIs bring to this global economy in innovation. So that's, and I know I haven't answered the question.
No, I think you have.
I just did not want to, miss the opportunity to put diversity on the table.
Exactly, thank you.
Okay.
Any other feedback around the question?
Oh my, yes. So Gail, you have hit the nail on the head when we talk about diversity. The other thing that I want to say too is that, as I mentioned earlier, many of our institutions have the capabilities, but they don't realize that they have the capabilities, if that makes sense. You know how you have something and you don't know you have it, and you don't know what the benefit, the value add of that something is. So, along with this pilot group that you're proposing that you are proposing, is that we really help our institutions, and I'm not talking about all 104. Get those that are best poised. Start with those that are best poised to do this kind of work, those that are already doing this kind of work, so that you can strengthen their capabilities. But within that framework, let's establish or let's develop a major capability statement. Collective capability statement. If you want to start with, whatever institutions there are, then let's develop a major capability statement. What are the capabilities? What are the collective capabilities of these institutions? Because we are not just talking about the partnerships between one institution and national laboratories. We are talking about multi-institutions coming together, and not just from the scientists or science, the STEM perspective. I'm a social scientist, but I certainly see the benefits of that that multi-interdisciplinary approach to doing the work that is needed to address and solve our nation's problems. So we get these institutions together from a pilot perspective, and we determine what their capabilities are. And then we also determine what laboratory equipment they have, what laboratory equipment is needed, that may be offset by some of the laboratories. And that's really how you began this relationship. You know, as Desmond talked about, you know, money is off the table. It's not on the table at this point. But what is on the table is something that is really very hard to quantify. And that's that intellectual prowess. That's the skills that many of our researchers, that many of our institutions have garnered over the 160 years, over the 200 years that they've been in existence, and just have been so barred down with their heads down and teaching and learning and all of these. And listen, I'm not besmirking that at all. That's our mission. That is why our HBCUs are started. It's to educate those who could not be educated at some of our other institutions. So we carry on that mission. But, you know, to expand that mission, now we have to look at it from an entrepreneurship, or as I call it, an enterprising ecosystem approach. Because that is where we all are now. You know, our institutions represent an enterprise. And most of our institutions represent anchor institutions. Most of our institutions are located in hub zones. We're located in opportunity zones. So that really gives us a lot of opportunity to do great work, not just great work, but impactful and sustainable work.
Thank you. Now, we definitely want to leave a good amount of time for question and answer. So I want to close out with one further question for the panelists. I'm going to ask that you guys each take 1 minute to give more insight on this question. And as I said in the beginning of the session, you know, we really want the audience to leave with some actionable strategies that you can take back in the space that you work in to really re-examine not only the partnership development, but what this means for national labs and higher education institutions. I have been working with the federal labs for over a decade, and while definitely there has been some strides, but I think there's just something that around these challenges about really kind of creating these tangible, sustainable partnerships. You know, we understand that the FDP can play a role. So just quickly, 1 minute, how can FDP be a useful platform or forum in helping to examine a lot of the issues we talked about today? And what active role do you see FDP playing in strengthening partnerships with national labs in this regard? So 1 minute each, quickly. Want to start?
All right.
Sure.
Right through this. I think one thing that, as I gather the feedback from my fellow panelists, I think one thing that FDP can help us is really maybe, especially building on top of what Desmond said, is can there be a DOE user manual, right? Can we really understand down to the basics? We don't have to go IKEA, right? It doesn't have to be just pictures and no words, right? This could be maybe a GE user manual where we do explain some of the basic structures and sort of playbook on how to work with the national lab and disseminate that far and wide, right? Just so that it's first principles, how a DOE national lab works. And I think maybe that's something that could be the follow-on, Michael, as you thought, yeah, can we engage the national labs to come up with something that's just simple to use, a user manual?
Laura, I'm going to jump to you for the next minute.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, for the, you know, professors and graduate students that you're hoping to foster this, like, these startups, you know, getting those resources to them, you know, telling them about opportunities at the national labs, encouraging them to apply. You know, this is something that I think I said before, you know, your graduate student research office, you know, whenever these students are applying for, you know, like the National Science Foundation GRFP, you know, this can be right alongside that. You know, students don't know, you know, and especially at Georgia Tech, you know, at least I was told, you know, stay in the lab, head down, focus, get out of here, you know, finish your PhD. And, you know, encouraging them to pursue this path is something that you plant the seed early. You know, telling them about these resources early will definitely help. So,
Gail, you want to go next?
I'm just following the thread here. Plant the seed early, and you know, I'm always out of turn, so forgive me. I know we have a question here talking about the AAAS with the RFP. I just want to say if anyone that's responding to that RFP and need an HBCU partner, Bowie State is very willing to do that, and I think it will add value to your proposal, because I love this HBCU MSI Tech Transfer Office. Wow, you know, that's incredible. And if we can start that, and like you say, if anyone in the room that's responding, please see me at the door, you know, and I definitely, Bowie will be one of your strategic partners on that solicitation.
Desmond, any insights?
Yeah, so I think you're doing it already, FDP. I think establishing a community of practice where these conversations can be ongoing and not just one-hit wonders, right? And inviting folks from DOE, from the labs, to come and talk so that they can manage the conversation a little bit, so that, you know, yeah, we can dream big, but within the context of DOE, right? It's a mission-oriented agency, and it's pounded into me for almost 20 years. So I think you're doing that. The other thing is, each one of your universities have someone that's deeply connected to a lab, right? I don't know if you call them your national lab liaison or DOE liaison. You have to establish that person. That's a best practice for universities, staying tethered to a national lab, right? Having someone that's responsible to manage the partnerships, whether they exist now or they exist in the future. Just having someone who knows who's the lab director, you know, who's his associate, you know, who's the associate directors of all the divisions, right? Someone who can track all those things. So, you know, because there are a lot of moving parts. People are in and out of the lab. And if you have one person responsible for tracking those and tracking the opportunities, I think that helps with all of these things. So it's not sort of this rush to 5 days before something is due thing that keeps happening.
Last but not least, Teresa.
Yeah, so I concur with everything that has been said. But also, just to kind of put a plug in this, to what Gail has said, engage HBCUs, engage MSIs in your work. Let's get together and really understand what our capabilities are, what we're doing, and how we are doing the work. And then also, let's assess those challenges and how this organization and other related organizations might be able to address some of those challenges. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Now we're going to open up for question and answer. I know that we have some mics that's in the room, so if anyone have any questions, please go to the mic. And I think we have about a little under 15 minutes.
Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mike Ayewa, the Chief Research Officer at Lincoln University of Pennsylvania. We heard about engage MSI. Let's be careful. The engagement is not just give me a letter and that's it. That's been the experiences. And so it has to be purposeful. The predominantly white institution should actively and respectfully engage the MSI and HBCU in the proposal development phases, not when you need the letter and the last minute, and you don't see the application until the award is given. Another comment, kudos to FDP used to have an ER, Emerging Research Institution. I think it's only a name only, just a tag. I've not seen any active engagement, especially in sessions like this, where you have special interest groups to talk about relationship between the research-intensive universities and the emerging research institutions. So before we start engaging the regional lab, let's make sure that we actively and respectfully engage this MSI within our regions in purposefully transformation. Thank you so much.
Any other comments or questions? Yeah, I see somebody walking. Give her some time.
Good morning. Thank you so much for engaging us in this very insightful panel. I want to give a personal thanks to everyone on the panel for agreeing to come to our meeting. For many of you, it's the very first time you've engaged with the Federal Demonstration Partnership. We owe a special thanks to Michael Nestor for having organized this and provided the support for our panelists, and I just want to make sure we acknowledge that hard work that was done to get this conversation started. One of the things I wanted to call to everyone's attention, at least from the faculty committee standpoint, we're very interested in establishing a permanent working group that would focus on this HBCU relationship and also to partner with GUIRR and keep this conversation going. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that and to thank the panelists for their comments today. And again, if you have questions, please join. We do have time in the session.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Oh, yeah, I can ask that question. Yes. Yeah, so AAAS is hosting an RFP, which will close May 30th, that encompasses the needs assessment for the HBCU innovation community to determine which is decided and needed to create a national office for HBCU tech transfer and innovation. Could the national labs play a consulting role in this work? And if one was established, what would be important in the implementation of activities? And what would be the actual program design to actually set up the center? Were a lot of people aware of the RFP opportunity in the audience? Raise your hand.
This is a great example, I think, of the challenges that you just pointed out, actually, in terms of communication, relationship development. AAAS has not done a great job announcing the fact that they have an RFP because they're considering a national HBCU tech transfer office. This is literally, Gail, what you were talking about. This is so needed so that we can collectively understand the strengths that our HBCUs, MSIs bring to our communities. So anyway, so they're asking for feedback, and I think there's no greater group than this group in this room, given the work that you all do, especially on the administrative side and thinking about administrative burden, on what is needed to make a national tech transfer office work specifically with HBCUs. And so what we were really wanted to just point out that they just extended the deadline until the 30th, which tells you they haven't really gotten a lot of applications because they haven't talked about it very much. So I'm doing my due diligence to let you guys all know. But secondly, the other question I think that's really important is, what do you need from a national tech transfer office? You know, what specifically would be, if you could identify the most important thing? Okay, relationships we know, but on a functional level, and maybe it does come back to the comment about we can't have letters of interest, you know, at the end of an application cycle. Maybe we need to develop a process for application development that starts early and with the investigators and with the interested parties, and we create that process and codify it so that people know they have to get together. I think, Dick, that's kind of what you were saying. So I guess the open-ended question is, what do you need? And I don't know if anybody has anything to add to that.
I would love to answer this question as the moderator. I think it's very important, and I think the theme of this panel is really thinking around the narrative and how we shape the MSI and HBC community. You know, often, and probably for the last decade, it is shaped from federal government to industry because there's a lack of knowledge about the innovation pipeline at these universities is often from a deficit mindset. And I think when we really think about how to create pipelines and inclusive pathways to bridge these partnerships, there has to be a lot of work to be done around the R&D capabilities at these universities. And similar to what Teresa said, you know, out of the 104 HBCUs, we can be transparent in this room and in many conversations to know that some of them are not prime and ready to think about tech transfer. It's going to be a phase. But there is a significant group of MSIs, and in particular HBCUs, that we need to change the conversation around their unique R&D assets. And until that is done, we're going to have a very hard time thinking around what does it mean for a tech transfer office. Because there's a huge gap, right? This is not from a deficit mindset. These universities are not charities. That's right. They need to be embedded in the American innovation ecosystem, so we can realize that they have a historical footprint across America in being inventors, researchers, faculties, and teachers. So I really think that's the foundation. So then, to your point, Teresa, we can move into the conversation around capability statements. What are they doing differently? What are they researching for underserved communities that's very different, that's not happening at PWIs? So I think to move the conversation forward and really kind of answer your question is that there's a huge education gap around characterizing these universities around their R&D translation. Any other?
Yeah, I think that the other piece of that should be something that DOD does very well, and that's your mentor-protege program. I'm in the throes of executing from an HBCU perspective, my 5th mentor-protege with DOD and with one of your major corporations, but that doesn't happen at every institution. So this mentor-protege kind of model would certainly work for our institutions. And let me also preface very quickly that when I talk about identifying those institutions that are well-positioned, what I really mean are those institutions that could come under phase 1. But while we're executing and working with that phase 1, what are we doing with phase 2? We are developing that phase 2. We're having sessions. We're talking to the administration collectively. We're talking to the faculty. We're really building capacity so that at the end of the day, that we see something that is sustainable as phase 1 moves out and phase 2, and then of course subsequently we move on and on down the road. The other thing that I want to say, and I need to share this with you, is that over the past year and a half, I've done some consulting work with Voorhees College, a small HBCU located in the rural area of South Carolina, who has a relationship with the Savannah River Laboratory. And so that small institution has really made tremendous strides. They were making tremendous strides, but they didn't realize that they were making tremendous strides. But they have so many of their students and faculty who are certified now in cybersecurity, and the way that they're working, it is really out of necessity that they're doing this. They've been able to, get their kids, their students in, shift their curriculum. I just think it was fascinating, and I was more excited just as an evaluator than the people were within the institution, because I could see the sustainable impact of this kind of work. To have our students to become certified working through the National Laboratory, Savannah River, and IBM, so that when they graduate, they're not just walking across the stage with a diploma, but they're walking across the stage with something that is more tangible, that's going to get them in the door much, much quicker, and that is a certification. And this whole notion of quality in cybersecurity and other areas in which they were being certified and trained in. So I want to throw that out.
Well, this is the end of our panel. As you can see, I did have a great starting lineup, right? Great people that really gave some great expertise. And I want to speak for everybody on the panel. I think, speaking for everyone, we're definitely interested in partnerships, pilots, great frameworks on how to move this work forward. I know that many of us come to conferences, we're at panels, we hear great conversations, but how do we actually turn some of these great insights to actually testing some of the frameworks and solutions that we discussed today? So again, we're very excited for this engagement, and please talk to us afterwards about potential partnership opportunities. Thank you. I'm going to